Welcome everybody to ESGX. We'll try Nigel one more time. Delighted to have you here with us today as we cover the monthly Green Jobs Report and also how to reimagine Appalachia around the Ohio River Valley. That's going to cover Ohio, Kentucky, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. Nigel, are you connected again?
Let's see if you can hear me
Great.
now. The screen has gone yellow. That's a good sign. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you very much, Paul, for jumping in there. No idea what happened at this end. And just as a very quick introduction to why we're all here and why this matters, of course, we all know the COVID crisis has had a dramatic impact around the world. This graphic just picks out the impact on GDP in 2020 from some countries. Almost all of them are negative around the world. That, of course, has translated into very significant job losses. The orange bars here are new jobless claims in the US, which peaked at over 6 million, but are still running at nearly 1 million a month. And indeed, that number has increased slightly over the last 6 or 8 weeks and is something like 4 times the level of a year ago. The underlying economy is really dynamic in a bad way. And of course, the blue bars there are continuing claims where the figures don't look good at all. I'm very mindful that this has particularly impacted young people. So these are the figures for youth unemployment again in the US. And whilst this has fallen a long way from the peak of something like 27%, it started to tick upwards again and is still pretty concerning. We have heard extensively from politicians, not just in the US, but elsewhere, talking about building back better. But what does this really mean? And I think the heart of this is that traditionally we've thought about taking action on environmental sustainability and things that are good for society as coming at a cost to growth or to profit or to investment returns. And of course, our view, and as we've seen repeatedly, is it doesn't need to be like that. So with that as introduction, I will hand over to Paul and Amir to take us through this month's Green Jobs Report.
Great. Welcome, everybody. Delighted to have you with us. Welcome to the 2021 series of Green Jobs Reports. Amir Khalegi here from the University of Missouri, Kansas City, also a research fellow at the Global Institute for Sustainable Prosperity that Fadhel Kaboub leads, along with Scott Fulweiler of University of Missouri, Kansas City as well. So Amir, let's talk about jobs. And this latest jobs information is as of the end of November, right?
Correct.
Okay, so there's a 2-month lag, and I hear that there's a push to potentially make this faster and more open source. Have you heard anything else about that yet?
I've heard a little bit about it, and I'm hoping it does push through because I believe that there is availability towards December data, but it is preliminary. But I do think it would be possible to get the granularity that we see 2 months back, rather than 2 months back, 1 month back. So hopefully we see that this year.
Great. And then let me just get this screen share going here and we'll be good to go. Okay, let her rip.
Perfect. So yes, very exciting. This is our first Green Jobs Report of the new year. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, our Green Jobs Report measures the direction, momentum, and changes towards a greener, more sustainable economy. So the way this is done, we analyze both HIP investor data and data from the Bureau and Labor Statistics Survey, and we combine them to give ratings for each of the industries within the United States. We take company data provided by HIP Investor that provides a human impact plus profit rating, which is based on the performance, products, and management practices of a company, which includes detailed metrics in health, wealth, earth, equality, and trust pillars with a focus on people, planet, and trust. And then the companies are then mapped to the industries using the current employment statistics survey, which are then rated based on an employment weighted average. There will be various industries within the Green Jobs Report, green being the most net beneficial, then medium tiered, rated industries, which are the 25 to 50 bucket seen here, and then the most extractive industries would be that of the 0 and 25 bucket, which includes oil and gas extraction or gambling industries. So our report specifically, it covers 179 industries, which accounts for 90% of total employment within the United States, not including government jobs. And what we have found is that green industries or greener industries that contain green jobs have been more resilient to the employment loss due to COVID-19. Proportionally, greener rated industries have been the least impacted by the COVID-19 crisis, while net extractive industries, especially the lowest tiered industries, have had the highest proportional job loss. And for reference, the February employment level, in February being the month before the onset crisis, we are at an employment level of 130 million. To date, with the most recent data from November, we were sitting at 121 million, so still 9 million below the February 2020 level. And seeing here, though, the green industries were significantly less affected by that job loss. And although we're down 9 million still, to be noted is that we saw an unprecedented reduction of employment of 20 million from March to April. So moving forward, in terms of the recovery, we have seen from the past several months that job recovery is no longer experiencing meaningful gains. So to take it into perspective, we saw the largest reduction in employment from March to April. From April to July, we saw a return of 9.5 million jobs, but the next 4 months from August to including the preliminary data of December, so from August to December, we've only seen a return of 2.3 million jobs. So less than a third of the amount returning jobs, right? But we can see here that the levels are significantly lower in terms of return from October to November. And this was the lowest recorded return or lowest recorded net change that we had seen since the recovery. And our net change from October to November was only 400,000 jobs. But you can notice here as well, there was a higher percent return within the net extractive industries, but this is due to them being the most affected and needing the most recovery because they were the ones to lose the jobs in the first place due to the COVID-19 crisis. Similarly, if we look at this graph, which take note that this is products and services as opposed to HIP ratings. Products and services are one of the pillars incorporated within the HIP ratings themselves, but products and services solely look at the net beneficial or net extractive benefits, I guess, towards the product that a company provides, rather than looking at everything such as the management practice environment.
Sometimes there can be efficient extractive companies. So Exxon is one of those whose product would rate red, but they pay their employees well. They generally have a higher safety rating. They're not reducing greenhouse gases. But other oil companies like Chevron are very diverse. So what we're trying to show here is that a lot of those companies had some deeper cuts with negative products, and those are coming back.
Right. Perfect. So another thing that consistently we have found is that first being the resiliency to job loss, but also that green jobs pay significantly more as compared to net extractive jobs or industries. Looking here, we have a pay level of just above $39 and 50 cents. For the green industries and for the net extractive industries, they're significantly lower. Specifically, looking at the November levels as compared to October, the green industries increased by 2 cents. And I apologize, there is a typo there. It shouldn't be from August to September, but it should be from October to November. But over the same time period of October to November, the medium tiered industries or slightly extractive industries increased by 3 cents, whereas surprisingly, this is actually one of the first months that it has happened, the extremely extractive industries increased by 7 cents, having the highest net change within average hourly earnings. But still, although having the highest net change, they are still the lowest paying jobs in regard to hourly earnings as compared to the rest of the buckets.
And Amir, that doesn't necessarily mean that people are getting raises. That just means
No,
the mix of paying jobs has shifted,
correct.
and that some of those higher paying jobs may have come back.
Yes, this is correct.
Got it.
This is correct. So, one of our interesting segments of the Green Jobs Reports includes the analysis of high contact and low contact sectors. This portion of the report mimics a study conducted by the St. Louis Fed, which looked at high contact and low contact industry sectors, which they used to categorize by using the Occupational Employment Statistics Surveys, which has a detailed catalog on working conditions for each occupation within every industry. So, definitionally, high contact industry sectors contain occupations which require work to be within 1 arm's length, whereas low contact industry sectors contain occupations that allow for social distancing. And to no surprise, the highest reduction was in high contact industry sectors with a reduction of around 5 million, whereas low contact sectors had a reduction of around 3 million. But most interestingly, even in high contact sectors and even in the high contact sectors, when divvying them up, the industries up by HIP scores, we see that industries with the higher HIP scores, even in high contact industries, were more resilient. And the same story is said for even those within low contact industries. So bringing attention to the graph, right? We see that if a company scored below a 30 HIP score, or the bucket of being below 30 HIP score within a high contact industry sector had a higher proportional job loss as compared to those above 30. So for high contact industry sectors, those industries that scored below 30 HIP score had an average reduction of 10%, whereas the above 30 HIP score had an average reduction of 7.7%. And the same story is said about the low contact industry sectors. Those below 30 had a higher proportional job loss, and those above 30 had a lower proportional job loss. For low contact industries, the average below 30 was around 7%, whereas above 30 HIP score, the average reduction was around 4%. So the key takeaway here is that even in high contact sectors, the most susceptible to job loss due to the COVID-19 crisis, greener jobs were more resilient in greener industries as compared to those in more extractive industries.
Great. Well, Amir, thanks so much for this in-depth report. It's so fascinating for us to have tracked this. It turned out that we have been doing this Green Jobs Report during COVID as
Right.
COVID hit, and to see this distinction in the economy, not only of the job cuts, but where they are.
And I'm glad you brought this up, because something I did want to bring up, something that will be exciting for next month's report,
Mhm.
The preliminary data for December actually shows the first reduction, net reduction since the recovery. So we actually lost 100,000 jobs looking from November to December. So something that we can look at for next month's report is to see where these jobs are being lost as well. And, I guess with somewhat of a bias, I'm guessing the more extractive industries are the ones maybe getting this reduction in employment. But next month's report will definitely be exciting in terms of trying to analyze, has the recovery stopped? Are we still, are we on a downward trend now? Or or do we have the ability to reverse this? So
Super. Yeah, so that'll be the last Tuesday in February, February 23rd. So please come back for the Green Jobs Report then. Amir, thanks very much. Fantastic.
thank you. Thank you.
So now we're going to hone in on how to create a greener Appalachia and how to reimagine Appalachia. You may know about the Appalachian Trail. That, of course, is along the mountain range. The Appalachia can have a wider or narrower definition. So we're going to talk about that in our discussion. But first, here's a 3-minute video introduction, and then we'll welcome the panel.
Most people in Appalachia, whether we're white, black, brown, indigenous, whether we live in big cities, small towns, or just up the holler, we love our families, our neighbors, and the communities that raised us. We work hard, we take care of each other, and we expect to be treated justly and to get a fair deal no matter the color of our skin or size of our bank account. But for too long, decisions that affect us have been made by politicians who are more accountable to the coal industry and their absentee owners than to us. They used our communities, our labor, and the land for their profit, sometimes as they divided and erased us. Then and now, the people of Appalachia are working for a brighter day. And it's time for a new direction. It's time for new opportunities for us and for the generations to come. It's time to build an economy that works for us based on our values and on our strengths, on our skilled workforce, our natural resources, our ingenuity and grit. Imagine jobs that stick around and that pay a living wage while protecting our health, our community, and our planet. Imagine that being black, brown, a woman, having a different identity or belief didn't mean less pay and more discrimination. Imagine a place where young people stay. Imagine all workers having the freedom to unionize for good benefits and a secure retirement. Imagine restoring the land, water, forests, and riverfronts. How do you reimagine Appalachia? ReImagine Appalachia is the start of a conversation, a framework that builds from our local talent and creativity to meet the challenges of a changing global climate while creating a fair deal here at home. Empowering working people, building community, and restoring the environment. Let's reimagine Appalachia together and make our vision a reality.
We're going to do that right now. I want to welcome Amanda Woodrum, who's the lead of the project of ReImagine Appalachia and also a senior researcher at Policy Matters Ohio. Also want to welcome Dr. Patty DeMarco, who's both a scholar and a report writer, as well as involved in local community. And then, as usual, on our Green Jobs focus, Dr. Fadhel Kaboub heads up the Global Institute for Sustainable Prosperity and teaches at Denison University. And Dr. Scott Fulweiler, who leads very innovative economics programs at University of Missouri, Kansas City. So welcome, everybody. Amanda, do you want to build off of what we just saw? It sounds like a very powerful initiative that we can all take. Why should we all get involved? And how should we do that?
Sure. So I think we're all sort of coming to understand that we have a moment in time at the federal level where there's a number of puzzle pieces in place to accomplish real structural reform and achieve federal climate solutions. And we want to take advantage of that moment. We probably maybe have 2 years. But it's also important to understand, and I think everyone does, that federal climate legislation has significant implications for Appalachia, aka coal country. And so that's sort of the reason why ReImagine Appalachia formed, is that those conversations that have been happening at the national level have been driven by folks on the East and West Coast. But we believe that Appalachia needs to be at the table or it'll be on the menu. And so the Coalition to ReImagine Appalachia has developed a collective vision on how to create a 21st century sustainable Appalachia and the blueprint for how we get from where we are to where we need to go. And the bottom line there is that Appalachia needs a federal climate infrastructure program created by the folks of Appalachia for the folks of Appalachia. And doing so, we can put hundreds of thousands of folks to work, building out the foundation for a more prosperous Appalachia. And that work is critical in even achieving this national climate solution. As probably many of the folks on this call know, Appalachia has long been a political stumbling block for national climate solutions. And we believe that we at ReImagine Appalachia have come up with the solution to that issue. And what it's going to take is investments. Appalachia is poor. We have abundant natural resources, but they have been exploited. Our workforce has been exploited. Our land has been scarred. The health of our workers and neighbors have been hurt because of absentee corporations in the extractive industries. And we've depended heavily on that for our economy. Appalachia, in doing so, has fueled the prosperity of the rest of the nation, while itself has suffered in poverty. So that's why we believe Appalachia deserves a fair share of any federal climate package. And the pieces and parts of that are, there's nothing magical about it. We need to modernize our grid. The country itself has an electric grid that hasn't been upgraded since World War II. We're talking about big brown poles and black wires. We all need to modernize that across the country, but also in Appalachia. We need to put more of the grid underground. And while we're doing that, we can lay the fiber optic cable for universal broadband. You can easily see how that will create many, many jobs. But you can't modernize the grid without those things. And the reason why it's important to put it underground is because we all know we're facing increasingly severe storms associated with climate change, and that is also true in Appalachia. So there's a number of pieces and parts to that investment strategy, laying rail or upgrading the existing rail infrastructure also can put people to work. We want to repurpose shuttered coal plants into eco-industrial parks. We think Appalachia could actually be a hub for next generation technology associated with energy storage, and there's a lot of reasons for that. So these investments will lay the foundation for a more sustainable economy built on local wealth and not absentee corporations and extractive industry. Extractive industries generally. But we do want to make sure that the jobs we created are union jobs. And so we want to see community and labor standards associated with any federal package to ensure that. So that's the basic gist of the package. And I think Patty's gonna dig a little deeper into in one of our particularly exciting areas.
So I'm really excited to be here, and it's always a joy to share the forum with Amanda. We've, I think, developed a really important blueprint for our future, and helping people to sort of stop thinking about Appalachia as a disadvantaged, abandoned, sad, sorry place is really important, because the people who built the wealth of America, the standing of America in the Industrial Revolution are still there. They have all of the grit and intuition and dedication and skill that we need to build a 21st century economy that works for all of us. And it's important to recognize that when we heal the land, we heal the people too. And when you empower communities, you empower the capability to expand a prosperity that can be sustained, and get away from the concept of a boom and bust, even if that boom only lasts for a decade or two. It's not something that you can leave generation after generation and regenerate the wealth. And why we look at healing the land as a really important aspect of this is that there is a lot of land that the profits were taken out and sent to other places, but the costs and the burdens have remained in the communities that were mined or extracted and not reinvested. So we're looking at reclaiming the mountaintops by attacking them with regenerative agriculture practices so you can reforest the mountains. And doing that, you can also generate community-based food systems, as well as repairing the watersheds. When you repair the watersheds and the streams and the rivers, you support other kinds of activity, including tourism, including just the capability to live on the land. And this is a really important aspect of having communities be resilient and sustainable. We have in America, 12 of the 50 states are food insecure, and 3 of the Appalachian states that we are with are food insecure, even though farming is 25 or more % of the economy. The food is not grown for people, it is grown for export and for commodities. And we are looking at urban agriculture as a new part of this, as well as rural agriculture to feed people. This is a really community building kind of a way to go forward. And I think the other thing that's important about regenerating the land and reforesting the mountains is the civilian conservation corporations that helped to recover America from the Great Depression of the 30s is a tool that can be employed to bring people into a transition workforce. We have millions of people unemployed and many more underemployed, many looking at a future that doesn't include them. But if you have something where the government organizes the way to repair the land, especially these areas that require a lot of repair, you can employ people and give them little bridges into a new way, into a new workforce, into structuring their lives around an employment and a new skill base. Especially if we engage the unions in this kind of work, we can use the apprenticeship programs of unions to help retrain and re-engage people and to empower workers, not just to get jobs, but to get the power of organized labor to fight for better wages, better working conditions, and fair benefits. You don't get what you deserve, you get what you negotiate. And having the ability for people to begin to organize again, the essential workers that we've been recognizing through this COVID crisis are at the very bottom of the wage scale. If they're essential, they shouldn't be at the bottom, right? The people that make our food and that take care of our hospitalized people, who take care of us, those people should not be at the bottom. So I think ReImagine Appalachia really takes a look at what it takes to rebuild community, reinvest in communities. We know what we need. We know what it takes, and we're tired of being at the bottom of the barrel. It is time for America to reward the people who made the greatness that we are and build for the 21st century in a new direction. So you have to remember the laws of nature are not negotiable. Climate change is not going to go away, and we can either find a way to have it work for us, or we're going to end up, in a situation that can't be retrieved. So I'll stop there.
Great. So Fadhel, you do a lot of work in this area in the region, and Scott, economically. So what's your impressions of how this can solve problems and be connected to our economic, financial, monetary systems?
Well, I'll make a couple of comments and cue in Scott for more comments on the macroeconomics of the opportunities that we have in the next couple of years. So to do a quick status report of what we have here on the table in January 2021, as Amir told us in the beginning of this webinar and the presentation, greener industries are creating the jobs that pay better, that are more resilient when we hit a recession, jobs that recover faster when the economy recovers, and jobs that are safer even during the pandemic, even within high contact industries. So it's a no-brainer. We need more of the greener jobs across the system. Number two, it's January 2021. We have a new administration for the next 2 years. At least there's urgent calls from all over the country. Groups like ReImagine Appalachia, and others across the country are saying we need federal spending to upgrade the infrastructure, upgrade the grid, build more resilience, create greener jobs. So the opportunities are there. And ReImagine Appalachia already has a plan, already has a blueprint, a bunch of studies and community organizations and mayors endorsing it, grassroots organizations all over the region. People are saying we're ready to upgrade this. And Amanda and Patty made a very compelling case for this. It's a transition that's going to happen across the country, across the world. We need to transition to a greener economy. The question is, are we going to be leading the transition, or are we going to be lagging behind? Are we going to take care of the people who will be losing jobs from the obsolete industries as technology changes and as we move forward? Just a quick kind of comment on one of the things that Amanda said earlier in terms of laying out, modernizing the grid underground and putting fiber optic cables for high quality broadband internet for the next 100 years. Who's going to do the digging? Who's going to do? We have workers who know how to dig. We have workers who know how to lay pipe. So this is the concept of a just transition, as in a guaranteed transition to good paying jobs with benefits, right? We're not telling people move to San Francisco, learn how to code, and then maybe you'll find a job. We're creating the jobs within the communities. Now we have to emphasize that the just transition is not just empty words, that it needs to be guaranteed and underwritten by the federal government, which means for workers who are close to retirement and are making six-figure wages in the existing industries. As we transition, we need to guarantee that we're not asking them to lose benefits or lose wages just because we're transforming the economy. So we have to make sure that we're not throwing anybody under the bus. The opportunity in the next 2 years, and this is true for every economist you talk to today, they say we have an opportunity to spend for the pandemic recovery and for climate action. The opportunity here is that when Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats negotiated the rules in the beginning of this new Congress, they exempted climate spending and pandemic relief spending, including health spending, from pay-go rules, which means we don't have to raise the tax revenues for it. We don't have to borrow for it. We spend because it's an emergency, because it's a priority. So we know that is the case. The issue is, how far are we going to go? Are we going to go just a little bit of spending just so we create some jobs, or are we going to go all the way to a full transition, to a just transition? And it will be expensive. And I'll say one thing about how expensive or not expensive this bold transformative transition is. Take into account the cost of doing nothing. That is the cost of the opioid crisis that we're already paying for and will continue to pay for if we don't do anything. Take into account the cost of incarceration. Take into account the cost of hospitalization for people who have breathing conditions because of pollution of the water and the soil and the air. All of these costs we're already paying for, and we're guaranteed to pay even more moving forward if we don't do anything. If we transform the economy today and create millions of good paying jobs and actually rebuild communities from within and restore the ecological balance and the economic balance in the region, that's the cheap version. And that's the more rewarding, that's the more resilient, that's the most obvious version that the average Joe would understand, right? Pun intended here. So
Amanda,
we have a blueprint here. So I want to cue in for Scott, and I think Scott will have something to say about this.
Just one question. Yeah, Amanda and Patty, you showed charts of billions or tens of billions of dollars. Is that the extent, or is it higher? Is it lower?
So the numbers that we showed are the numbers for Ohio specifically. So we're basically feeding our blueprint into a job impact analysis, and we're doing that state by state. So we started with Ohio, and then we are going to release the Pennsylvania numbers later this week, and the West Virginia numbers are coming down the pike soon. But we're envisioning pretty hefty investments for each of our states. But together, they will put hundreds of thousands of people to work in coal country. And I think that's really critical. And while I have the mic, I do want to emphasize something both Fadhel and Patty alluded to, and that is that Appalachia is union strong. We have an incredibly skilled workforce that have been trained in some of the best union apprenticeship programs that are out there. They have foundational skills that can easily pivot to the work of the new energy economy. And I think one of our major goals is to target workers in the coal industry, as well as just fossil fuel industries altogether, for work in this new energy economy. And second, that recognizing that we're going to be creating hundreds of thousands of jobs, we will actually be growing the union movement if we ensure those are union jobs. And we want to ensure that as we grow it, that we're opening the doors to a more diverse workforce of the future. So we want to build pathways into union jobs for Black workers and women and other people of color.
Yeah, and I think that one thing I'd want to add to that is that you were asking about the cost. The cost of not acting on climate change is enormous. The costs are incurred across the country, but in our areas in particular, they are very punitive. And, you know, there have been programs like abandoned mine land reclamation that have not been funded. They've been identified and priority projects, especially for wetland and watershed restoration, that have not been funded for the last 4 years. And those amount to like $9 to $12 billion in arrears of identified high priority projects that really are shovel ready right away because they've been analyzed and you have a prioritized list for each state. We'll be issuing a white paper on this shortly because it's a huge opportunity because water is life. And when you restore the water systems and repair the wetland areas, then you really are extending opportunities far beyond just the former mining area. And the other thing I want to elevate from what we've said and what Fadhel just said a little bit ago is that some of the technologies in the emerging energy economy include things like need for directed drilling. If you do geothermal-based heating and cooling systems like we have in our Borough building in Forest Hills, you need directional drilling. You need to know how to make pipes go underground. You can't be drilling through everybody's basement. You've got to have a way to do heat exchange systems, all of that piping. If we're going to move to anaerobic digestion to get methane instead of from fossil sources, so you're not in the fossil carbon cycle, but in the contemporary carbon cycle, they require just the same kind of things as refineries. They need big retorts, they need pipes, they need steam apparatus, all kinds of things. It's the same skills, except applied not to a fossil base, but to a regular biological cycle. And doing things like growing industrial hemp, where they used to grow tobacco, which is not a thriving industry anymore, you need the same infrastructure, the shade growing, the drying sheds, the harvesting equipment, collecting fibers and materials that can be substitutes for plastics. These are amazingly generous opportunities, and they help restore the ground as well.
Yeah, I want to jump in here and add, you know, there's so much of this work is, you know, not magic jobs. They're jobs that we already know how to do. For instance, another example is you putting more of the grid underground. That's involves laying pipe and running wires through it. We know how to do that. Yeah.
And extending the broadband to places where it isn't. I mean, we did that with the rural electrification of America in the 30s. It is something that needs to be subsidized by the government because it's a public benefit. And governing for the public good is something we've avoided for too long. You can govern for private interest, and that's fine and wonderful. But if that becomes the central focus, then you have the profits going to private companies and the costs going to the taxpayers. And that's just backwards.
Yeah. Well, and in fact, we can't really wait for the private sector to solve it, particularly in rural areas. The cost benefit equation is just not there. And that's why the Rural Electrification Act was actually a part of the original New Deal. It's very possible if the New Deal hadn't happened, the original New Deal, that Appalachia might not even have electricity. You're talking about lots of infrastructure investment needed in a relatively low population area. The costs just don't pay off. But you cannot have a modern economy without access to these things.
Scott, let's just step in, Scott, for a second. So, Scott, you look at monetary systems for countries, hone in on how they can benefit specific regions. We have a new Treasury Secretary, Janet Yellen, who ran the Federal Reserve and now in charge of Treasury. What what's possible and what's possible now with at least for 2 years with the Democratic leadership in the White House, and can tie break the Senate?
Well, of course, I'm probably not the person to read the political tea leaves, but certainly, as Fadhel was saying, there's a window right now where more is possible. I do think there are significant obstacles in framing that economists do, and particularly economists that are center left, that are the ones coming into these positions right now in the administration, which is the two things we are constantly hearing are we can run deficits now because interest rates are low, and we're hearing, in fact, there's just Washington Times did a special on a paper on this one today, which is that a focus on the multiplier effects of deficit spending, of government spending. And if you're trying to deal with something like what we're talking about here, those are the wrong points to focus on. The multiplier, that's a short-term thing. You're talking about a situation where, for the economy overall, financial positions have been hit. It's not about bang for the buck, it's about restoring, right? It's about investing for the future. And we saw this in 2008 too with the Obama thing. We saw it in 2003, frankly. This focus on multiplier effects, this sort of old school thinking, and it keeps us from, the framing keeps economists that are giving advice right now from talking about the sort of things we're talking about here, which is, what's the multiplier effect matter when you've got 10 to 20 years to deal with climate change, right? That's so in terms of macro, that's a huge issue to deal with policy wise. I think we just mentioned benefit cost equation there. Biden did sign an executive order that we gotta wait to see the details, but suggested looking beyond the standard benefit cost equations that they do to evaluate regulations and such. We'll see. I'm skeptical given the people that are in there, regardless if it's a Democrat or Republican. There's some differences, but the methods tend to be similar. But at least the language is an improvement. So that's good. It's not nearly the sort of thing that's enough to get done what we're talking about here, though.
Well,
can you say something about the argument that we hear that this is the time to spend because interest rates are low and it's cheap to borrow now? If we follow that logic and interest rates go up in 3 or 4 or 5 years, then those same voices will say it's time to slow down the spending. Right? Can you say a few words about that, please?
Yeah. Well, yeah, we could have dealt with climate change, except interest rates were too high. That's like the dumbest argument ever, right? Yeah, I mean, interest rates are a policy variable. If you want, interest rates on government debt are a policy variable. If you're putting the cart before the horse, if you're trying to earn a particular return on the policy, right? What you're trying to do is solve a problem, right? And that's the reframing that we're seeing right here or the reframing at least that we're seeing of the argument, that the return is a policy variable. The interest rate is a policy variable. It's not a policy goal. The policy goal is to do the sorts of things that Amanda and Patricia have been talking about.
Amanda and Patty, so what are ways that either people can take action or even businesses can take action? Is this only a government policy and federal funding, or are there other public-private partnerships, or what else is part of ReImagine Appalachia?
Well, I would like to say one thing, that this isn't a problem that can be solved by either top down or strictly bottom up. It really requires an understanding of a system change, a transformation. You're going from being caterpillars to being butterflies. And we need to have a fundamental reshaping of the priorities. And that's why I really like your HIP indicator, human impact plus profit, because it adds in that dimension of value that allows you to make decisions that say, well, we need to heat our homes and cool our homes, and we need to have appliances, and we need to have transportation, but we can do that with a much lower impact on the climate. We can do that with much lower emissions. And just the fact that we're having this kind of a symposium without all of us traveling is indicative that you don't have to go backwards. We're not going into living in dark caves over a, huddled over a fire. We're really looking at applying our knowledge and our technology to substitute for emissions. You don't need a whole cupboard full of clothing, right? You need to be comfortable, and you need to be feeling rewarded for your interactions with people. What you really need to thrive and survive is not dependent on having so much stuff, on having so much things that you use once and throw away, that you have to really refocus on what matters. And doing that, we can reduce our per capita consumption. We are still 4 or 5 times higher in per capita consumption in this country compared to other industrialized places like France and England and Germany. We really need to pay attention to that efficiency major. And
To answer your question, there's a couple things. First of all, if you want to get involved in ReImagine Appalachia, you can go to our webpage, www.reimagineappalachia.org, and there's actually a place where you can sort of sign up to get involved and clarify as well which pieces and parts that might make sense for you to get involved in. Second, I would say, well, federal policy is our main focus right now because that's where the big opportunity is. And I don't think we can transform Appalachia without significant federal resources. So it's sort of an all hands on deck moment. But at the same time, we are engaged in a number of conversations. You mentioned the mayors that we're working with. They're calling for a Marshall Plan for Middle America. And we are working together to bring communities across states, even state lines, to work together to promote more responsible and sustainable development. Federal policy is an important piece of that, but there are things that they can do collectively with state and local policy. One of the things we're exploring, for instance, is the power of joint purchasing for clean energy. So long-term power purchasing agreements for energy generated, clean energy generated within the region. Solar farms in Appalachia, for instance, we don't have that right now. We don't have great models of that. It's partly why people in Appalachia think of solar panels and solar jobs as magic jobs. But there are efforts underway to sort of address that. And there's ways, like we're talking with local governments, but hospitals, universities and their endowments, all these sort of anchor institutions throughout the region can also join these sort of collective purchasing efforts. And it's not just for power purchasing. Buy Appalachia, buy the food for your university cafeteria locally, do it as part of a collaborative. That's going to foster those local farmers using regenerative agricultural practices. But we need federal support for all those things to build even the local food hub network. So, it's every conversation we're having is thinking about the federal policy implications to support those things.
Yeah, and I'm a local government official, and I know we spent 2 years doing a climate action plan for our community, targeting net zero by 2050. And we have a whole collaboration of 38 communities around the city of Pittsburgh working together on a climate action implementation. And I think that is going on in a lot of places where people around hub cities are joining together to amplify the impact of their collaborations. There is a joint purchasing, power purchasing across Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, Virginia, and New Jersey, the PGM system, where we do 100% renewable energy purchases for communities. And we've been in that for a number of years. So,
and this is sort of where the sustainable finance arm comes in, right? So if you have local governments and anchor institution committed to purchasing this power, it's low risk for somebody to then come in and finance it. So this is an opportunity for, say, hedge funds, or and we're also looking at public pensions and union funds. The city of Pittsburgh recently changed their pension policy to invest in more responsible projects.
Maybe the Fed should buy them.
And the Fed should buy them, the state pensions, federal.
They just started doing this at the European Central Bank, some of these sorts of things. So,
you have more details on that, Scott, of what specifically they're doing?
Actually, I was going to send it to you because I just saw it today. So no, I don't have a ton of details for you, but it's a green bond purchase, basically.
Got it.
There is actually more hope on this front, because the Europeans have been leading the way in greening finance. And there's an organization that's an international organization now. It's called NGFS, which is the Network for Greening Financial Services, or something like the financial system. And the Fed finally joined after 10 years after launching this network. The Fed a couple months ago, Jerome Powell made his first statement on climate risk finally, and then a week later joined NGFS. So I think the Fed is going to quickly follow what some of the European central banks and financial regulators have been doing on this front. So there you go. We have green bonds ready for them to invest in.
Yeah, and there's a question in the question box about green banks for large-scale sustainable projects. So we've covered green banks and green banking on previous ESGXs, so definitely check out esgx.org. But is there a green bank component or state infrastructure bank component to what you've designed, Amanda and Patty?
We've definitely explored that. I haven't gotten the hard answers on how it would actually work, but the idea of investing according to emission reduction goals makes sense to me. We have something called the Ohio Air Quality Development Authority in Ohio that does something of that nature, which I think maybe is a model for green banks. But yeah, I have lots of questions about that, so maybe I should watch your webinar.
Okay, we'll do some cross-learning here.
And possibly for the public banks too.
The mayors in the
state banks
for Middle America have been focusing on redirecting pension funds and encouraging unions and corporations to direct their pension funds into green investments. And so I think that's a starting point in their plan, in the Marshall Plan for Middle America. There's also a very robust public banking movement. I know they're very close in Philadelphia. It's been presented in Pittsburgh. There's a pretty robust movement to public banks. So I don't know if that can be co-joined with this.
Yeah, and just to pick up on the point here about risks, and we talked a bit about PPPs earlier, with the right structure in place, so if you run a school system, it's going to need power for the long term. So you're not taking on new risk by saying we're going to buy power for a long period of time. But with the right structures in place, there is a huge amount of capital available from the private sector at really low cost of capital to support anything which really looks like infrastructure. And this is coming from pension funds and other long-term investors who want that kind of return channeled through infrastructure investment managers, etc. And that continues to grow. It's the amounts of money are just massive.
This is also a place where investment tax credits and production tax credits shifted from fossil industries toward the sustainable industries, and regenerative industries can make a huge difference, because that often drives those kinds of decisions. And these are things that are going to take changes in federal law. I've been trying to itemize the embedded subsidies to the fossil industries, and some of them go back to 1800s. 1837 is the law that gave primacy of mineral rights over surface rights. And all of our ecosystem services, our life support system, is in the surface rights. So
one of the things I want to make clear on all of these things, whether it's a power purchase agreement or some kind of other investment, is that there really needs, at least in Appalachia, needs to be some sort of union requirement or union preference on this work. We cannot change the politics of the region permanently without making sure that these, that green jobs aren't also crappy jobs. It's really important.
That's the myth.
It's not always a myth.
Yeah. So as we always wish for a time machine and more time to take action, as well as more time for this discussion, it's time to sort of bring it to, a pause. So Amanda and Patty, what guidance or advice would you offer? And then Scott and Fadhel, if there's any closing words, and then Nigel will wrap up for us.
Well, just that now's the time. If you care about things, it's time to sort of step up. We are the change we want to see. And the moment is now.
And I think the main thing is to be positive. We have such tremendous capability and potential, and we need to empower our communities, empower people to take back what we need to do to make the future fine and wonderful. Call your legislators and tell them that they care.
Super. Fadhel?
I think it's a couple of things. One, it's a no-brainer. Two, we have the people, the resources, the commitment from the region to make it happen. And this is beyond the region. Obviously, this has to be a national effort as well. What we're waiting for is, the big push from the federal government to make this happen and to make it happen the right way. As Amanda said, with union jobs, with ESG standards. Maybe we should bring in HIP Investor to help with the setup as well. So we have the resources. We need to make this happen, and the clock is ticking. So this is urgent.
Scott?
Okay. Want to say one thing quickly, which is I believe our last Green Jobs was on had a public banking focus. So people can check that out. Also, just to sort of frame what I said earlier with what everybody's saying here now, we've got policymakers, the economists that are giving advice with one foot in the yes, let's do these sorts of things. Let's think more broadly. Let's stop using our traditional GDP and inflation and all these sorts of criteria that we used to use, financial return, blah, blah, blah. But then they still have a foot in the other world, which is multipliers, deficits, interest rates are, those sorts of things constraining. So there's a lot of us that have to do work on our own parts of this.
Super. Well, I want to thank Amanda Woodrum and Patty DeMarco, part of the Coalition for ReImagine Appalachia, and Dr. Fadhel Kaboub of the Global Institute for Sustainable Prosperity in Denison University, and Dr. Scott Fulweiler of University of Missouri, Kansas City, and Amir Khalegi, future doctor, PhD, economics, for his work on the Green Jobs Report at University of Missouri, Kansas City, and Nick Gower, our producer. Nigel, over to you.
Well, I don't think I could put it better than Patricia's just put it in the chat, that this is not a crisis about technology or the economy or even financing. It's really a crisis in decision making and ethics, because there are solutions, there are things that governments can do, there are things that businesses can do, there are things that investors can do that will make a significant or have a significant impact. As an individual, and I know I say this often it comes from one of my Norwegian friends, just take half as many trips and stay for twice as long and insulate your house. And that's a big chunk of what you personally need to do for the next 5 or 10 years. So I think there's some great examples in what we've talked about today, where there are practical things that can be done. And there is a lot of capital out there motivated by supporting these sorts of projects and the attractive risk return profiles which come with them. So with that, maybe hand back to you, Paul, just to talk very briefly about what we've got coming up in a fortnight, which is the next discussion around the Global Handbook of Impact Investing.
Yes, so please make sure and get your own Global Handbook of Impact Investing. It's good for weightlifting. Available from Wiley at wiley.com, Global Handbook of Impact Investing, as well as on other booksellers around the world, available via ebook and print book. So for the first half of the year, we'll continue to dig deeper into the 50 authors and 30 chapters. And we're going to talk about expanding the boundaries of impact investing in our next episode in February. And then we'll have our Green Jobs Report at the end of February. And we'll continue to add additional content at esgx.org. So please suggest topics that you'd like to see covered or speakers you think are interesting and taking action. Remember, it's up to us to create the world that we want to live in. And so just as Amanda said, it's time to get involved and get into action. So on behalf of all of us at ESGX, my co-host Nigel Lake in New York, I'm Paul Herman in San Francisco. We'll look forward to seeing you next time on ESGX.